And here we are for another episode of Dualistic Unity Social. I am very excited about these episodes. I love the fact that we just get started. We have no idea what we're going to talk about. And then we just do that for like 45 minutes to an hour. It's basically an episode without all of the formal bullshit of being an episode. There's no introduction. There's none of that. It's just here we are, and let's see where we're going. So welcome, everyone.
Yeah, it's funny with the the formal bullshit. We have about the least amount of formal bullshit I think of any podcast. There's not like I hear so many podcasts with like intro music and it's like all that stuff. And the most we do is hello and welcome to blah 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 episode, and that's about it. But um, yeah, I guess something that I was just to get right into some stuff. It's been funny because the last while. Uh, oh, hold on. Oh, I gotta make sure. Oh yeah, I gotta click Instagram. Sure, that's live. Yeah, there we go. Okay. It says, did you get that alert connection issue for some things? Or is that
I
on
think
my
you're good
end?
to go now.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Um, the last, I don't know, it feels like the last couple months I've been, uh, I was gonna say like caught in my idea of myself a lot and in and out of it and kind of in like a fog, but then there's like a negative connotation to that. And I don't mean for it to come across in that way. There's like a benefit to being in it. But recently I've had a lot more moments of clarity and especially when I smoke a little bit. And so last night it was like really clear, like just feeling like I'm everything and not having, and it's really just not making assumptions about things, like settling upon ideas of things is all it is. And so it's always right there, but it's interesting to be in and out of it. And it's actually been, I think, really beneficial to not be in a spot of clarity for a while because I've I had this underlying feeling like that was better than not being clear. And so it's just been interesting, like my perspective on that. Having more moments of clarity now because I feel like it's been it's been fucking a while. And it's funny when you're like in it, and I don't even know how to say it without sounding crazy. But when you're in it, there's not. It's like you're seeing it for the first time, but there's also a feeling like how have I been like quote unquote lost for this long, but it's not lost. And this is like the perspective. This is the benefit for me recently was that it's no longer this idea of being lost versus not being lost. It's just they're both they're both equal options. And I think that's the biggest thing is that it's not just going towards this one thing. It's like there's just more options on the table. Whereas when I was younger, there were fewer options, but those options that were there back then are still here now. There's just more. There's just more potential ways of seeing things. And there are consequences to buying into bullshit illusions, but it doesn't mean it's bad. And I think that's what I used to think of it as was like that was bad to do. Whereas now it's just another option, but you're a little feel a little freer, less concerned when you don't heavily buy into or invest in the idea of yourself.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that a lot of our perception is based on the experience and or rather our opinion of the experience that we've been having up until that point. And so if you're caught in your idea of yourself, like if you're really caught in your idea of yourself, which is generally where we end up by the time we're like mid-20s or so, um, we experience a bunch of consequence. We're trying to be something. We don't feel like we're enough. There's anxiety and pressure and stress, and we're trying to figure out, what's the right routine to have in the day? What's going to make me the happiest and most fulfilled human being, and all of that stuff. And so we start to get this idea that once we're there, we're going to be happy, and we forget that it's where you are actually. It's doing what you're doing. And the only way to get good at doing what you're doing and to be where you are is to go through all the different variations of what you're doing and where you are. And that's the up and down process. And so, question that came to mind was, you don't judge yourself for going to sleep, do you? But
Say that again. What
you
is
don't
sleep?
judge yourself for going to sleep at night. No. Well, why would you judge yourself for going into, basically like a waking sleep? Because that's what you're doing. You're going into kind of a dream that is in your head. You're going into this fictitious reality of the narrative you've created. And so you're disconnecting from reality a little bit. But you do that when you go to sleep and you dream. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just recognizing that sometimes you need to do that to process some information. Sometimes you're doing that because reality itself is just too much for you. You need a break, need a bit of a rest, need to recoup a little bit, and so we use our thoughts, we use our narratives, we use our illusions, as it were, kind of as a buffer or a governor for the intensity of what we are all the time, right? We just don't necessarily look at it that way. But yeah, at first you're like, got to be clear and conscious all the time. It's like, right, but try playing with your child that way, right? Because they want to play, they want to pretend, and guess what, they're pretending things that aren't real, and they're having a great time doing it. So what's your issue?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, that's a conversation I was having yesterday was the shift from childhood to adulthood and the shit that like teenagers do and that sort of mentality of judgment, comparison, you know, doing well because did I freeze for a second? Never mind. Doesn't matter. Doing like feeling good because you made a certain sports team when you're 12, then just turns into feeling good because you got promoted. And it's like the same sort of shit that makes us feel good or bad about ourselves, what someone thinks of us. Are we a part of this friend group? Are we not a part of this friend group? Like, do these people like me? And so we have this teenage mentality that then carries into adulthood. And so I was having a conversation kind of about that and then just like stages of ego development and how adults are in the same stages of ego development as most teenagers. Like we don't move beyond that. The building of the idea of ourself, the taking it very seriously, and then we continue to do so throughout the rest of our life, thinking that it actually means something as opposed to moving beyond that and recognizing it as a tool and recognizing that it's not something that actually means something about us. And that's the difference between, taking something very seriously, kind of being lost in the dream and not lost because lost isn't the right word, but just taking a dream very seriously. Like when you recognize more clearly that there isn't something to be taken quite as seriously. And that's the shift, but it doesn't make anything better or make you better for doing so because that's a part of being caught. And like that takes you out of that spot. Like it can't be this makes me better because who's it making better that isn't also everything. And so that's it. I don't know. It becomes such a
You can
fine
understand
line.
where it comes from though when you feel shitty, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're feeling shitty, it's immediately you're like, I'd like to feel better, right? And that's the thing. You don't ever think to yourself, right, but this is shittier because I'm reacting to it. This is actually getting more shitty because of my perception of it being shitty and my perception that I can't get through it or I don't like it or that it's going to be difficult and all that. And what you end up finding is all of these opinions and preferences that you have that's actually making it shittier than it has to be. Whereas if you let them go, it's just what it is. It's just what it is. You're going through something. Like the idea of being confused, all right? Or it's like I'm not in a state of clarity. We describe it that way because it's the only way that makes sense compared to how we feel when we are in that quote unquote state of clarity. But clarity about what? I mean, it's like we oscillate between clarity about how involved we are with our narratives or clarity about the reality that we're a part of. Like getting lost in your illusions means you're still, in clarity. It's just that you're distracted. You're focused on something. You are clearly distracted, right? Like you're still there. You're just invested in things that you think are important. And so everything is twisted by that. right? What happens? It's not that we suddenly gain clarity, it's that we start letting go of the shit we're distracted by. That's when we start to feel more clear. It's not that we are more clear, it's that we're giving ourselves less things to chew on at the same time. And so we just feel more clear. It's just that we don't recognize how often we're juggling like dozens of things.
Yeah, it's almost like we're all like, if, quote unquote, clarity is walking down the street, paying attention to it, getting distracted is like literally getting distracted, like looking at a bird flying by and just watching that bird and then focusing so much on that bird and then thinking that that bird's actions and everything that it does means something about you. It's like it doesn't mean you're not still walking down the street, but you're just entirely focused on a bird and missing everything else that's there. But it's always an option to focus on the bird. It's not wrong to focus on the bird. It just comes with certain consequences because you're so focused on that. And then you're focused, and even that, like, it's not that far off of a comparison. Like, the bird does its thing, does movements, flies, maybe it stumbles here and there. And then if you tie your value to how it is, it's not that dissimilar from tying your value to how other people respond to you. Like, you don't have control of that at all, right? Just like you don't have control of what the bird's doing flying by, and you're focused on it, thinking that it means something about you while you're still walking down the street, and there's other things you could focus on. There's a street you could focus on. You could think about something else, but it's like everyone's walking down the street focusing on a bird, thinking that it means something about them, and forgetting that there's still walking down the street and there's just other options. There's not better or worse things to do. There's just way more than just focusing on the bird.
See, that's a really funny image because, you know, we talk about mental health and disorders and stuff, but it really is just taking a certain perception, getting so lost in it that it becomes reflexive. And now it's not something that you can recognize as an optional perception. You're just stuck in it. It seems like you're always there. You're always going to be there. It's reality, and you get just lost in that. And so it's conceivable and probably already happened that somebody would become paranoid of the birds judging them. And you can imagine this person walking down the street surrounded by, well, say in New York, all these pigeons, doing their thing. And it's like every time a pigeon looks at them, it's like, oh God, it's looking at me, it's judging me, it's all of that. And so you're creating all of these narratives of how these birds are judging you and what they're judging you for. And you're lost in that. And all of a sudden you step in dog shit. Right? And why? Well, because you're worried about all of these fictitious narratives. It's not like the birds are saying any of that stuff to you. Right? It's not like people are coming up and saying that they're judging you. Right? You're just assuming. And so we get lost in it and we step in all kinds of dog shit.
Yeah, and then we get pissed about the dog shit, and then we're focused on the dog shit, and then we step in another pile of dog shit, and that's like the spiral of, oh, I'm having a shitty day. It's like, because you keep focusing on the shit that's happening as opposed to where that's coming from. Like, it's coming from being distracted. It's coming from not focusing on where you're at, and that's all it ever is. Like, the moments, quote unquote, moments of clarity I was referring to before is just recognizing very clearly that this is it. Like, this right now is the extent of everything happening, and it always is. And we get pulled into other things thinking that something else is going to mean something about us or increase or decrease our value, and the hope for that, but it all stems from not being attentive to where you're at and thinking that your value can waver, and not realizing that it can't. Like, it's not shifting, it's not changing no matter what. And so everything stems from that idea that it could waver, because then there's the concern of what's going to happen. And if it's based on how other people think, it's really just based on your perception of how the other people think and the concern for that all the time. Just like the birds, just like focusing on the fucking pigeons and then stuffing and shit. That is, yeah, it's such a, I don't know. It makes a lot of
Now
sense.
that's a good video idea. You need to, just get a bunch of pigeon shots and then just catch yourself like looking progressively more panicked. You can do like some music with the pigeons and just, you wouldn't worry about their judgment. Why would you worry about mine? You know, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and just end it there with you running from the pigeons.
Oh, that's a great idea because that's just it. We just put weight on everyone else, but it's not that different really at all. Like, what if pigeons had opinions and you care? Like, it sounds silly. It's kind of like, the comparison where, believing in Sky Dad isn't so different from believing in Santa Claus because it's not. Like, caring about what other people think of you isn't that different from making up a narrative of what you think the pigeons are thinking about you. Like, imagine if we found out that pigeons had like an internal dialogue and were actually the most judgmental creatures. Like, there would be mental health disorders that started coming up about concern for the opinions of pigeons. And people get very caught in that and they get frustrated. And there would be like movements to kill all the pigeons to get rid of them. But it's really just all stemming from your illusion of yourself, your perception of yourself that you're maintaining. And you're projecting that judgment because, like, if that were to happen, the pigeons still wouldn't be able to talk. And so you wouldn't be able to find out. You would just be making assumptions based on how they're acting and how they're flapping their wings. And there would be all of these assumptions based on that. And that's the same thing we do with body language. Someone looks at us funny, we assume that they're judging us. Meanwhile, we're looking at them. They're looking at us, wondering why we're looking at them, while we're looking at them, wondering why they're looking at us, both thinking the same thing. Why is that person judging me? It's like neither of you are. It's just in your head. Like, it's just your own assumption they are. And it's essentially never correct.
It's kind of funny when you look at it for what it is, right? It's not, again, like, fearing the pigeons isn't a loss of clarity. You are just clearly absorbed in a certain perception that you're invested in as truth. That's the funny part. Like, we're not diminished by our confusion. We're just over invested. We're actually using our incredible potential in a way that's so inefficient that we feel fucking lost. And that's kind of funny when you really get that. You're not actually trying to add anything to yourself. You're not actually trying to get anywhere. You're just not getting so distracted. It's really all it is. And you're giving yourself a chance to take things in. It's kind of like allowing yourself to take a breath. It's very, very important. We have a great question. And this is where does this experience actually take place? Like, if it's not in space or time, where would it be? So this is a hard left turn. And we're not going to get too deep into this one because we've covered it numerous times. But to answer it very briefly, what makes you think that it is taking place somewhere? Aside from the fact that really isn't satisfying to your brain. Your brain's like, but answer. No.
That reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my good friends like last year at some point. We were talking about how space is infinite. And he was just like, no, there just has to be an edge. There just has to be an edge. And I was like, all right, well then what's on the other side of the edge? It's like, it's like not space on the other side. And I'm like, what? What does that even mean? He's like, man, I don't know. I just don't want to think that. And that's what it got to. And I was like, I know, because we can't conceptualize that. We can't conceptualize eternity. We can't conceptualize the infinite nature of space. And it's just our desire for it not to be that way. It's just like, no, I don't want it to be that way. It's like, that doesn't change it. Because if you break it down, like if you really go to the extent of what infinite means, like when they measure the universe, it's just the known universe. It's like the known universe. That's where our fucking measurement tools end. That's all it is, but it doesn't mean that it stops. What's next? It doesn't stop, because then it's like, what is it, in a snow globe? But then what's on the other side of the snow globe? More reality, more existence. And so it's really just our own desire for it not to be that way. And then we make something up, but that doesn't change the inherent nature of it.
So if it's not happening anywhere, then how is anything happening at all? I love this question. I love this topic. It's super unsatisfying. And so let's see if I can break this down really, really quickly. This is why it's so important to accept the subjective experience, because it's really the only thing that allows you to see what what it is we're trying to talk about. So if you could take your subjective experience, the awareness of yourself, remove any of the story of what you think you are, remove everything that you see, remove everything, just remove it all except that you exist. You just exist, like within your mind, but there's no outside your mind. There's no brain that your mind is within. There's no body or environment that your mind is within. It's just your mind. That is the all of everything. Okay. And in that, not blackness, because it's not blackness if you look at it, is potentially anything. Potentially anything. And that's reality, is that all of this is potentially something that we could experience as the all of everything. The awareness that is existence could perceive itself as separate and experience itself in any way whatsoever, because it is all that is. All that could possibly be is within that nothingness that is subjective awareness. And so reality is the expression of all of those potential moments. So this is happening in potential. This is a potential experience that could happen if existence was separate from reality. And it's not, but it can perceive itself that way. And so the potential of that perception is what we are all experiencing. But the perception itself would seem absolutely real because it's reality having it. See, there's nothing more real than the dream of existence itself. And so while all of this is happening to us, in reality, it doesn't exist anywhere because existence itself isn't anywhere. It's existence itself.
Yeah. And because I can hear someone say, like, having a response to that and just be like, well, you don't know that. And it's just because they're not willing to actually look at it, right? Like,
It's the refusal to be alone. That's the thing, is that to get it to see what I was saying about the subjective experience, you have to be willing to let go of everything I was saying, let go of. And most people can't. They're just too terrified. They're like, no, human in the world, born in this year with my name and social insurance number or social security number or whatever that is. And it's just, we've got so much narrative. It's so hard to sit back from that. So we are already experiencing existence. Like, this is it. Well, this is one facet of it. You are all of existence, and everything that is possible is here and now, but it's expressed as all of the possible here's and now. This is why the universe is so goddamn big and it lasts for eternity. And this is just, again, one sequence of events that we call the universe. Eternity is forever. So regardless if the universe is 13.7 billion years old, or now apparently they might be wrong on that calculation. God, I love that shit. That it might actually be 27 billion years old because the rate of decay of the speed and blah, 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 blah. Point is that if you take all of those billions of years on a timeline of eternity, it disappears. Which means that this universe could have been and gone, been and gone, been and gone, been and gone countless times, and has. Because eternity is a long goddamn time. Because there is no such thing as non-existence.
and so the willingness to let go comes down to, as you said, being like the willingness to be alone, the willingness to let go of other people. And so this is this is how I was feeling last night, and just talking, having some conversations about it. It's funny because, like, I feel kind of different when I'm in that spot. There's like it's not like intensity in the sense of seriousness, but just intensity in that, like, my voice is coming from a different place than it normally is, in a sense. And, like, I'm pretty sure my eyes, like, I don't know, dilate or something. Like, because the people I was talking to, they were saying, like, you sound kind of different right now, and you look different right now. Like, they straight up said I look different, and I was like, in what sense? And they
Your
couldn't
eyes
really.
widen, you're more enthusiastic, your voice isn't quite so hesitant. There's just a lack of barrier. There's a lack of filter, and we're so not used to that because most of us live within such a giant filter. It's the reason we suffer through social anxiety. It's the reason that we go through all of this paranoia about doing the right thing or the wrong thing or all that stuff, and all of that. It's like wearing this really thick fucking cloak, and so when we're talking to people, they barely hear us. Like they'll hear the muffled version of us, like we're coming from behind something, right? Instead, you're like, hey, how's it going? And your eyes are wide and you're fully awake and you're enjoying yourself and you're not all lost and feeling sorry for yourself and all this other stuff. And so they're just like, whoa. And it just catches them off guard. And it's just because they're so used to you being afraid.
Yeah, it is. It's so interesting because it really is. There isn't like a second guessing of anything. As you said, like the hesitancy isn't there, the concern isn't there. And so it's interesting, like with that, when you feel that way, when you feel very clear and it's just a lack of concern, and it's through like they all kind of tie together in that if it's all just you, there's no one else to look at, to be concerned about, because you realize like the only concerns you're holding on to are your own concerns and your own judgments of yourself all the time. We're just using other people as excuses for those things, saying, oh, they're judging me. Oh, I'm afraid of them judging me. It's like you're just afraid of yourself judging you. And you don't want to admit that it's just you judging yourself. So you push it onto other people. You create narratives about other people. And because with judgment, especially, like when you look at it, you can see that most people aren't doing it, and those who are dealing with their own shit. Like there's very few people who are overly judgmental and assholes about things, like making fun of people who aren't insecure. Like it's very, very, very uncommon, and it's almost like if they are, they're insecure, so it's almost never that way. And so it becomes less of a thing to fear because you see where it's coming from, and so there is less concern. But yeah, in that spot, it's funny how much we have in the way, like you said, the cloak, the barrier between that lack of concern, like really what you are deep down. When that comes out, but I found it's just so interesting that I was told that I looked different, and they were like, something just changed, and I was feeling everything like very fucking intensely, and I was talking a bunch, and just there was not even like a thought crossing my mind, basically. And it was, yeah, it was very interesting.
Well, I encourage anybody watching this to go back and check out Andrew's original podcast, the Andrew Murnane podcast, and you can check it out on his YouTube channel. The reason I say that is because not just listening to his voice, but watch his body language, watch his face when he's talking, and then go and check out some of the most recent episodes on dualistic unity and watch the difference. All that's changed is that he is more fluidly himself. That's all that's changed, is that he's not stopping himself from using his hands when he talks. He's not stopping himself from emoting when he's feeling something. And when he feels confused about something, he stops. He's like, well, now that's interesting, rather than just trying to gloss over it because he's insecure. Like all of that shit's gone. And as a result, he seems like a totally different person. And you do. And as much as you may have physically changed, there's more than that. It really is the animation of your face. It really is just how alive you really are, and how much you're willing to express that. It changes so much. It really does. And this is why I've run into people from my past and they're like, you are Ray, right? Like they have problems recognizing it because I'm so very different, not in just how I look at things, but how I look because of how I look at things. We have a quick follow-up here. If all possible moments are simultaneously happening, then why am I only experiencing just this character? And do I experience this character again or only once? So two-part answer. One, this character exists forever as a potential. That's the whole point. The potential moments that you've experienced always exist in potential. And your particular variation of experiences, your timeline, this version of you, always exists. Every version of you always exists, always in potential. And so, therefore, somewhere within space and time. So that's one answer. This is what Jesus was saying about eternal life. There is only life. God is of the living. Death is a fiction. All right. Second part, and this is the one that's really meaty, and I recommend that you go and check out the Dualistic Unity podcast, start in season 1 and go through season 2 if you find this interesting. Why am I only experiencing just this character? What makes you think you are? Outside of how distracted you are by this character, your attachment to it, your idea that you're it. What makes you think that you are just the body you identify with? Outside of just familiar habit and possibly, wanting some sense of certainty. What if you're more than that? What if your idea of yourself isn't the truth? And we know it's not. So everything that you're wrestling with right now is largely a result of the illusions that you're still largely invested in. So if you want to let go of all that, you can. It's just by questioning those assumptions, like even what we mean by being human. This is what gets me when somebody's like, "Oh, we're not a human. We're not humans having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual having a human experience." It's like, instead of just recategorizing yourself with another label, why not just explore what you are without giving it a label? Right? Question what you mean by human. Do you mean this sack of meat? Because there's a lot more to you. Do you mean the awareness that runs that sack of meat? In which case, there's a lot more to that. Do you mean the sack of meat that's actually just energy floating around, somehow maintaining consistency as a reflection of your awareness? See, there's so much more to this. So I would say don't be so quick to assume that you are, in fact, only experiencing one character, because you're also me and you're Andrew. And we're all doing this at the same time. It's just that, just like an illusion that we get caught up in and it limits us from experiencing all the other things, just like the pigeons stop us from seeing the dog shit, your fixation on your self-image as truth stops you from feeling everything else that you are. Food for thought. Definitely check out the podcast, season 1, episode 1. Great place to start, scratching the surface. I do want to mention very quickly, because we're going to adjourn here in about 10 minutes for a 15-minute break, that we will be continuing on Patreon for our tier 2 call today. We do this 5 days a week. You can join us on a group Zoom. You can chat with us, ask us questions. We can get deeper into this particular conversation if that's what interests you. Likewise, one last announcement. We are currently hiring. We are looking for a advertising sales agent, and we are awesome to work with. You can set your own hours. What we're really looking for is somebody who sees the vision of what it is that we're doing here. And so we would prefer it if this person was familiar with the podcast. We will ask you to check out the podcast if you would like to work with us. This is a commission-only sales position at the moment, though it can lead to a salary later on down the road. We have never put time or energy into marketing advertising space on our podcast, and we have over 200 episodes of an hour to 2 hours each. There's a lot of advertising space, so we're looking for somebody to help us fill that space. So if that's something that interests you, we would love to chat with you. You can follow that link there, or just reach out to us here on social media, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be fun. Already got some people in the works with that, but there's not a cap to how many people we're working with on that. So yeah, definitely if you got any experience there, or if you're just enthusiastic about the conversation and want to get into some sales type work, then it's a spot for it. But in regards to the assumption that I'm only experiencing this right now, like I think a lot of it comes from our idea of control as well. But it's such a limited idea of control too. Like we think that, oh, I can move this arm. It's like, if you think that's what you are, then who's moving it? Like if you are the arm, who's moving the arm? It's like, I am. Yeah. So you're not also the arm. And it's like all of the internal mechanisms of our body, the beating of your heart, the digesting of your food, the growing of hair, the growing of your nails, all of those things, the healing of wounds. When you get a cut, it just heals. Are you doing that? Like, are you focusing, if you cut your arm and like looking at it for 4 days straight, saying heal, heal, heal? No, of course not. Are you like when your heart's beating right now? Are you thinking heartbeat, 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 heartbeat? You eat some food. All right, time to digest. It's like, no, that's not your focus. So is that you doing it, or is it just what's happening, what's going on. And could it be that you don't really have the control that you think? And it's similar. I mean, it's the same as recognizing a leaf, recognizing that it's the tree. It's still the leaf, but that's not all it is. It's like, and we get, on the side of like the non-dual philosophizers and the non-dual teachers pushing the whole narrative, like there is no me, there is no me, there is no me. And it's like, yeah, there is. You're it. It's just not the limited idea that you think it is. It's like you're still you. Like this whole meat suit body is still a component of you. It's just not the all and everything of what you are. It's just a component because you're everything. You're me right now. You're Ray right now. You're just very, very invested in the leaf that you think you are. But it's the entire tree. You're the whole fucking tree with the roots and the branches and then, all the space around it and fucking everything. But for the example of the tree, like just because a leaf thinks it's just a leaf doesn't mean it's not also the entire tree. And that's the recognition, is that it's the entire tree. Like you're the entire tree perceiving itself as a leaf. And when you dig into the whole control mechanism of control, like there's things that we can do, there's functions that we can have as a mechanism of evolution and whatnot. But an example is, you feel like you're moving your arm, but you're not moving your arm hair. Like you can't move that if you wanted to, right? So it's a component of the function of what we are. But just because you're doing that doesn't mean you're not also doing everything else. It's just your investment in that idea, thinking that you're just that, and the whole idea that comes with it, and the narrative and the story that you tell yourself constantly, that you're bringing into each and every moment. But as that falls away, as you start to question that, as you start to realize, like, oh, maybe that story is kind of bullshit. It's based on a lot of assumptions. There's very little evidence of it. It's like it starts to fall apart a little bit. It starts to crack. And through that, you can start to realize, like, okay, well, if I'm not that, then what am I? And as long as you remain curious and don't settle on something else, you get to that recognition. You get to the realization that you're the tree. Like that's where this conversation is where questioning goes. Like if you're willing to question without settling upon an answer because it's uncomfortable to keep going, like you get to the recognition of being everything for eternity. Because it's what's left. It's what you are. Like the recognition that your reality is what's left beyond all of the assumptions that you're making. You're just making a fuckload of assumptions.
And what's dangerous here is that we're talking about this and we're sounding all very, analytical and logical and all that fun stuff, and that'll get you only so far, because what we're talking about isn't a memorized concept. It's not something that you can just believe in and in any way make any progress. You actually just have to let go. You have to relax. You have to relax and be vulnerable and be yourself. And there's a whole process to doing that that has nothing to do with memorizing or learning anything. And so it's something that is a result of being on the path of doing the work of questioning yourself and having a little faith in what you are and all of that stuff. But it also helps to be in conversation with people who are on similar paths, people who are in fact also trying to let go of their layers, because in every layer of ourself that we let go of, we become more sensitive to what we are actually experiencing. And so when you have a group of people who are more vulnerable willingly, all of a sudden what you start to see as spiritual people are like, oh, the synchronicities. You see what that shit really means. You see what it means when you're not looking for confirmation bias, when you're not looking for angel numbers and all that other crap. And you start to see that people really are an extension of one another. We mirror each other in a way that is seamless and just obvious, but you cannot see that while you're looking for it, while you're trying to be spiritual, while you're trying to be aware, while you're trying to be conscious, you're trying to get enlightened or any of that crap. It just gets in the way. And so while this podcast and what we do can help, the conversation can help, it's the community that is the power behind everything. It's the fact that you on your path are the exact person that somebody else on this path needs to talk to exactly when they run across you. And you may not know that because you're lost in your shit, but there is no division. So get involve yourself in the community with other people who are on this path, because it's a community of one, you. It's not about fitting in. It's about you being on your journey and everybody else going, yeah, I'm doing the same thing. And in that, we are in this together. So if you want to experience a little bit more of this, not just the conversation, but the experience itself, jump in the community. We have a Discord of over 800 members right now. It's totally free to join. There's conversations happening all the time. If you can't do that, or if you want to go a little further, join us on a group Zoom. As I said, we have a Patreon page where you can join us 5 days a week. We also do a free public group every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. You can find that on the website. I'll throw the QR code for our 7-day free trial on Patreon here on the screen. 5 days a week, we chat. And in these chats, we just learn to relax, be ourselves, question ourselves, be a little vulnerable. Sometimes people join, they don't feel like talking. And then all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, they're talking a little bit. And then all of a sudden, 2 months later, they're on the screen all the time, leading groups, possibly in their own town. It's fantastic. It's really, really inspiring. And then on top of all that, you can go the extra distance if you really want to be physically present with these people and talk to them in real time and let go of this electronic buffer that we're experiencing. You can come to any one of our retreats, any one of our events. We have our largest retreat coming up on November 11th in the Netherlands. There's going to be 40 people here, all in all. 34 community members, Andrew, myself, people who are helping us out. This is going to be an intensely eye-opening experience, just for the fact that, again, it's not about us learning anything or teaching anything, but actually watching ourselves in motion when we get our idea of ourselves out of the way and allow ourselves to witness it. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. If you can get involved, we'd love to see you. But aside from that, join us on Patreon.
Oh yeah, and all those experiences too. I know we're wrapping up in a few seconds here, but it's really a spot where people are recognizing that their own judgments stem from their judgments of themselves, and so there's very little judgment of anything because everyone's catching it in themselves, and so it's a very open, free environment to work through things. And another thing I was talking about yesterday with someone was just how everyone has shit like under the surface. And when you relax, it kind of opens up all the layers that have been suppressing that shit. And so the relaxation opens up those things. And so that's what makes the retreats and even Patreon calls as intense as they are. Like it's a great time and it's relaxing. But at the same time, like you're working through stuff that's actually going to have impact on your life. Like, sure, we could have a retreat where we all just like watch TV all day and just kind of like have a fun time but don't actually look within at all. And so we do our best to strike a balance with no agenda whatsoever and just open up the floor to people doing what they want and working through things they want and like really being free in yourself in the least judgmental environment ever. So all that's left is you looking at your shit. And as you do, it's like the benefits of the retreats is as relaxing and great of an environment as they are, like the impacts carry with you through your life. It's not just this siloed week long or long weekend experience. It's like it shifts the way you go back to your life. And that's the real beauty of them is the shift that you start to see. And then, we got Patreon, so we can all chat about it after the retreats as well. And that's always a blast.
Yeah, exactly. And just somebody was saying, I've got a bunch of questions. I'd love for you to answer them. We'd love to answer them. Join us on Patreon or join us in one of the free groups or join us on one of our Dualistic Unity Raw episodes that we record every Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We are always here. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We're going to shut down here, take a small break, and we will see you on Patreon in about 15 minutes.
Bye, everyone.